Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video. I'm Lil Smurdy. Thank you so much for watching the video and I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. And subscribe please. What you need to do is pre-pot while magic potion. You use presence of mind before pull. Start using Arcane Blast and continue using Arcane Blast until you get Trinket procs. After you get your Trinket procs, you should pop all your cooldowns and just nuke the boss. Besides that, you should just continue using Arcane Blast as much as you can. You use Arcane Missiles on 3 or 4 stacks. I usually use it on 4, and during your cooldowns you should continue just use like 6 or even 8 Arcane Blast to make sure you get a proper burst at the start. You should blink every flame jets and make sure that you bribe one of the druids in your group for an innovate because it's gonna be needed as arcane. On Razorscale, you just stay on your mount, don't use any ability or anything until the boss spawns. Make sure you target the boss before you bring him down so you have that extra second of damage. Insta pop all your cooldowns when he gets down, when Bloodlust is up. Make sure you blink every single wing buffet. And that's it, just nuke it. On Razorscale, since it's a really short fight, you can also use Arcane Blast a few more after 4 stacks just to pump in some more damage. On XT, make sure you pre-use Presence of Mind so you get that insta Arcane Blast, insta damage on. Hold your cooldowns until the heart is active. Once the heart is active, pop all cooldowns and just nuke the shit out of it. I would just perma-use Arcane Blast as much as you can on the heart, and just because you're doing the most damage as Arcane Blast, so just use Arcane Blast all the time. And in the end, maybe you can use one Arcane Missile, and then insta after the heart is dead, you should insta pop Evocation to get all your mana back, and then you just continue to focus the boss and focus the sparks when they're up, but never use arcane missiles on the spark, and stop attacking sparks when they're at like 20% HP, because you do not want to miss out the cast on the boss because the spark is gonna die and then your cast is not gonna count. So make sure you always DPS it down to 20% and then switch back to the boss. And pray that you don't get any mechanics, because that's the real reason you can parse, is if you can just avoid any mechanics and just stand still on one point and just go full ham. And if you need to, make sure you once again bribe a druid for innovate and don't focus the ads as Arcane Mage. Just focus the life sparks until 20% and then the boss, nothing else. So moving on to Iron Council, depending on how good DPS you have in your group, you should pop your 1 minute and 2 minute cooldowns on the first guy instantly when the fight starts, so you will have them back for phase 3. Make sure you always have as close as 100% uptime inside the blue rune, because that gives you 50% increased damage. Whenever Rune Master Molgame is casting Shield of Rune, make sure you insta spell seal it, because even if you don't break it during the phase 1 and phase 2, you're still gonna be invincible and you can just avoid any mechanic really. And then in the end of Rune Master Molgame, and when you're gonna phase into the phase 3 on Steelbreaker, Make sure you spell steal the Shield of Runes and make sure you have it on you. And just before you're gonna face into Steelbreaker, you wanna go on top of Rune of Death, stand in it for like 4 or 5 seconds until you break the shield. Then you want to blink into the rune, pop all your cooldowns with Bloodlust, and just do like 20-30k DPS on Steelbreaker and carry your guild. Because that's what we do as Arcane Mages. We just burst in small phases and we carry the guild like that. On Algalon, if you're not the star caller and you just want to make the best log you can, make sure you stand far away from everyone else so there is a less chance that Cosmic Smash will spawn under you, so you don't have to move as much, so you can just stand still. Besides that, on pull, you just use all your cooldowns with Bloodlust and you just burst the boss as hard as you can. After your cooldowns is off, you want to bribe a druid for Innervate. If you have the spell power talent that you get more spell power after taking damage when you have your shields up, make sure you always use a fire ward if you're close to a cosmic smash before the cosmic smashes explodes, because then you will get a bit more spell power. Before you're gonna enter the big bang, you want to make sure that you frost nova the living constellations, because it's really good and you will avoid anyone closing it on someone else. Besides that, you just want to continue nuke the boss the entire fight as much as you can. You want to wait on energy gloves to being up, and you want to wait to use your second potion when you have your icy veins and your energy gloves back up. So you have the maximum haste when you're popping your second cooldowns. So you can just have like a second little mini burst. Moving on to Kologarn. If you're playing Arcane Mage here, you want to stand separately from everyone else as well. And if you really want a pad, you should bribe a healer here instead of a druid. You can bribe a druid as well for Innovate because you might need it. But you should bribe a healer to make sure that you can stand still in case you get the I-beam on top of you. Because if you really want to parse on Kologarn, you need to have like 100% uptime on your abilities. So what I do as Arcane Mage on Kologarn, I make sure I only DPS the chest, like the body, as much as I can. And then only DPS the right arm whenever someone is grabbed to make sure they don't die, because you don't want any deaths. Because if you want a good parse, everyone needs to be alive, so everyone can do as much damage as possible. Kologarn is really straightforward. You pop all your cooldowns with Bloodlust on pull. Make sure you pre-pot and make sure you use your second pot when you have your 1 minute cooldowns, or your your energy gloves back up, so you get extra damage and extra haste. Auriaya, you want to pre-pot a bit earlier, because depending on how you pull her, you're not sure when you're gonna get in combat when she's running towards you. So I always pre-pot a bit earlier to make sure that I at least get a few seconds on the pre-pot, and so I can also use another one during the fight. So on Auriaya, you Bloodlust on pull, you pop all your cooldowns, and if you really want to parse, you should do a tactic where someone kites the tigers away, so you can just 100% full nuke on the boss to make sure that the cats won't jump you that spawns, because if they manage to jump you, you're silenced for 8 seconds and that will make it hard to parse. Besides that, you also want to bribe another druid here to make sure you get innervate after your cooldowns, so you can just continue casting. If you're playing undead, you want to use your racial on Terrifying Screech. If you're playing a troll or anything else, I usually block right before and then have like a cancel aura macro, so I just block and then I click block again to get out of block, so you have maximum uptime on the boss, and then the boss should die because it's a really easy boss. And of course, if the fight is longer than 1 minute, make sure you use your second pre-pot. On Hodir, if you really want to parse, you should avoid attacking the flash freezes, because if you have a good group, everyone else is gonna kill them. And you want to make sure that when the campfire spawns, you want to insta stand near the campfire so that you will stack the buff on top of the boss. If there is a light near a campfire, you of course want to stand in the light and in the campfire. When someone gets Storm Cloud, you want to pray that that person run towards you instead of you having to run to them. But if they do not run to you, or if you see them, they are close to you, you should still run to them as well to make sure that you get the Storm Cloud buff. Because even as Arcane, you're gonna do some massive damage on the boss. So make sure you get the Storm Cloud. And make sure you always have one in the raid or two standing near the campfires to make sure they always maintain the fire buff. And just make sure you stand in the lights as much as you can the entire fight. And that's Hodir. Moving on to Freya. Freya is quite an interesting boss for Arcane Mages. So depending on the order you get the ads, if you get the big ad first, or rather whenever the big ad spawns, you want to make sure you use your cooldowns on the first big guy to just maximize damage and maximize uptime, and to make sure that you can use your cooldowns a second or even a third time during the fight. If the small ads spawn first, you want to use only Arcane Power and just go full ham with Cone of Cold and Arcane Explosion on the small ads to just maximize damage, because with Arcane Power you can actually do some decent damage on the ads. It's not gonna be like fire with Living Bomb and stuff, but you're still gonna be able to make quite some damage. And then when the free medium ads spawns, you want to make sure that you always focus Snap Lasher because you're range. If you have cooldowns here, you should pop them on Snap Lasher as well, because Snap Lasher has more HP than the other ones, and they usually die a bit slower than the other ones because all the melees are on the two smaller ones. So if you have cooldowns, make sure you use them on Snap Lasher. When the rotation is coming again, it goes the same. If the big one is up, you want to make sure you always stand in a mushroom. Even after the big ancient mob dies, you still want to stand under a mushroom for more damage. If it's the small ads, you want to pop Arcane Power if you have, and just Arcane Explosion as much as you can. When they get knocked away, you want to use a Blizzard on them, because you do not want to be near them when they die, and Blizzard will do the most damage on them. If it's Snap Lasher and the other two medium ads, you want to pop cooldowns on Snap Lasher as well if you have any. And if it's the big ancient one, you also want to use cooldowns on that guy if you have one. And if you get Nature's Fury on the big guy, when you have cooldowns up or whatever, you want to ice block it instantly and just continue DPSing. And that's Freya, guys. Moving on to Thorim. On Thorim, the first phase, when you're killing the big worm and a few ads, you can do as much damage on them as you want. It's not gonna count towards the log, but you can do as much damage as you want either way, because you're gonna use evocation later during the fight before Thorim anyway. So as a caster, you're most likely gonna be in the tunnel team. You just kill the mobs in the tunnel. If you wanna log, the only damage that counts on the log is on Thorim, so whatever damage you do on any ads will not count. So in the end of the tunnel, after you've killed the last big guy, you want to make sure you use evocation before you jump down to make sure you have 100% mana when you start the actual boss fight on Thorim. You're on Thorim, you pop Bloodlust, you pop all your cooldowns, and you pray to God that the pizza slice, the little lightning stuff that comes from the wall, does not come to you. And so you can just stand still the entire fight and just burst down the boss. If you do get the pizza slice on you, you can ice block it at the end of the cast and then just get out of ice block as fast as you can. And if you get it more than once, well, that sucks for you. You can blink away to a safe place behind someone else and just continue the entire fight behind those guys to make sure you have like as much uptime as you can on the boss. Moving on to Mimiron. So make sure you pre-pot before the fight starts and use your 1 minute cooldowns and 2 minute cooldowns on phase 1 instantly at the start of the pull, because you're gonna have your 2 minute cooldowns back up for phase 2, and phase 2 is the most important fight to nuke the boss fast. So you might not have them up instantly at phase 2, but you will have them up during phase 2. So make sure you use your 1 minute and 2 minute cooldowns at the start of phase 1, and then use your 3 minute cooldowns and all your cooldowns that you have back on phase 2 whenever they're up. And after every single phase, you want to use evocation to make sure you have 100% mana, because as Arcane, the evocation ability is only a 2 minute cooldown, and every phase, depending on how good group you have, every phase will be around 2 minutes. In phase 3, you want to make sure that you always DPS the boss as much as you can, because you're playing Arcane Mage and you can only really do good damage on one target at the same time. So make sure you just have one target at all times. If the boss is at a bad position, if there's a lot of the fires, make sure you do damage on the assault bots. Make sure you do damage on the emergency fire bots as well, because the emergency fire bots, yes, they clear fire around you, but you don't need many of them up. In our raids, we don't have any one of them up at all. We just fire cap the room and play off the safe spaces that we have. So make sure that you always kill any mob that you can. It doesn't matter if it's a bomb bot, a junk bot, assault bot, or the boss. Just make sure you have something you're attacking all the time, because all the damage on any of the ads will count towards your log. So you just want to perma attacking something, and then when phase 3 is over, you want to use evocation once again to make sure you have 100% or close to 100% mana when you go into every single phase. Moving into phase 4, you want to make sure that you just DPS whatever part of the boss that has the most HP. It doesn't matter if it's the body, the head, or the middle part. Most of the times it's gonna be the head, because only range can touch the heads. And then just make sure you stand safe, avoid the mechanics, and just blink away if you have to. And that's Mimiron, guys. On Vezax, you want to pre-pot as well if you have your pre-pot into a macro with your cooldowns. If you don't have pre-pot with your macros, you don't have to pre-pot. But I pre-pot during every boss, even if I won't benefit from it, I will still pre-pot to make sure that when I press my cooldowns, I won't use that potion, because I want to use the second potion that I have in my macros whenever I want to during the fight later. So on Vezax, you only ever do damage during the Shadow Crash, when you're standing in the black pools on the ground. So whenever you're standing in the Shadow Crash, On Vezax, this is the only really boss that you want to use Arcane Missiles whenever you get the proc here. So it doesn't matter if you get the proc after 1 or 2 casts, you want to use it instantly. Because you can't regain any mana during this boss. So if you want to log on Vezax, all the damage from when the boss fight starts down to 5% is all the damage that counts towards the log. So if you really want to, you should pop all your cooldowns on pull, or not on pull, but whenever the first Shadow Crash has landed, and then just use Arcane Missiles whenever the proc is up. Because this fight benefits Arcane Mages super hard with the haste that you get. So make sure you always only do damage during Shadow Crash. If you get Mark of the Faceless, you want to insta-block the first one to make sure you can do more damage. If you get a second one, well, it sucks, but it is what it is. But then you just want to make sure you blink away from the raid group. Just pop your cooldowns again when you have them back up and nuke the boss as fast as you can down to 5%. And when it hits 5%, you want the entire raid to just stop doing damage. And then when the ad spawns, you want to pop your cooldowns that you have left and nuke the ad as fast as you can, but you usually want to wait maybe a few seconds so the tank can get aggro on it. And then you just finish the boss. And that's basically the entire fight of General Vezax. Moving on to Yogg-Saron. This fight is actually really fun as an Arcane Mage because your cooldowns align perfectly for each phase during this boss. So before the boss spawns, before you're gonna run into the room and start the fight, I use my pre-pot. As stated before, it's because I have my potion macroed into my macros. So whenever I pop my cooldowns, I also use my pre-pot. But if I use a pre-pot before, I get the 1 minute cooldown. So that means that I can use my cooldowns without popping that potion. So when the fight starts, when the first ad spawns, I use all my cooldowns, mirror images, icy veins, energy gloves, and my troll racial. And then you just do as much damage as you can on each and every single ad. Make sure you avoid the clouds. Basically stand still, and then when the clouds are close to you, you just blink through them to a safe spot, and then you continue to blink through once again if they're getting close to you. You get as little movement as possible. And same with Mimiron, with the different phases. Same here on Yogg. So when the first phase is done, you want to use Evocation, so you have full mana going into phase 2. When phase 2 is active, you want to pop your cooldowns whenever you have them back up on the Crusher Tentacle, because they have a lot of HP and they need to die, and you're gonna have your cooldowns back up for phase 3 anyway. So use all your cooldowns whenever they're back up, but make sure you save your pre-pot for phase 3. Depending on how, if you 1 phase, 2 phase or 3 phase the brain, make sure that you save your cooldowns for phase 3. Once again, before phase 3 spawns, you want to use Evocation before as well, so you have 100% mana going into phase 3. You want to pop all your cooldowns with Bloodlust on the boss. If you have a lot of sanity, you want to just look towards the boss when he's casting Lunatic Gaze. It's gonna do quite some damage to you. When he's casting Deafening Roar, you want to make sure that a paladin use Aura Mastery so you don't get silenced. And you should just continue facing Lunatic Gaze and bursting down the boss until you have like 10 sanity. And then if you have that low sanity, you want to look away at every Lunatic Gaze so you don't get mind controlled. And I only focus the boss at all times because the melees are gonna cleave down the ads and also other casters that has good AoE damage. So that's every boss for this entire raid tier. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope this guide is useful in some way to you. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. Please leave a like, subscribe. It helps a lot and it means well to me. Thank you for watching. Peace!